as far as I rate this album, I give this album a 4.2 out of 5. Actually, no, 4.3 out of 5 even. Margins matter. And the reason why I say that is because, like, I don't think there are like too many instances, within the field of music where you have something which is artistically great that kind of comes together with, I guess, promotional hysteria, right? Like when this album kind of first came to the fore, it was almost caught up within like the whirlwind of Amy Winehouse, and it gave the album even more of an engine for it to be accessed to by the masses. And I think when we even just kind of like break down, the vulnerabilities on this album, like it's really touching, and you really kind of get to you get to you get to enter her world in a very intimate and fragile way, and you come to understand that, this woman had a lot of demons. And even though the album is relatively short, um, you leave it with a full-on experience of what it's like to live in the mind of Amy Winehouse, and when it kind of comes to artists bearing their soul in that manner, like I always kind of give an extra layer of appreciation, especially when it's then, married with what I consider to be, musical brilliance from both a production side, but also from a lyrical side as well. She's got a very strong pen game, and yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Hi guys. I'm gonna give the album a 4. Um, I don't really know anything. What else I can add to what you say about her? Because I feel like the album is successful commercially and is appraised artistically. And I am not like very well versed on Amy Winehouse discography, because when listening to this album, I realized so many of those songs I had listened to them either through movies or people using them for like backgrounds of music video of social media videos, and I just never imagined that she was the author of this or some of these songs, and I was so shocked. I was impressed by how embedded in the culture she is, so much so that she's just almost omnipresent. You don't have to know who she is by face, but you definitely know her work. So that definitely made me appreciate the album a lot more. I didn't finish the album entirely because I was caught up with stuff and I couldn't give her the entire time that the album deserves. But from what I was able to hear, definitely a strong 4.
Hi, so my name is Princess. I would give the album probably a 4.5 out of 5. So big Amy Winehouse fan, sort of grew up listening to her when I was younger. I think the reasons I probably appreciate this, as you sort of said, Jordan, like the penmanship is brilliant. Like her ability to, I think on Wake Up Alone, her ability to just like pour herself into her writing, her experiences. It almost feels like in the moment that she was experiencing it, she perfectly captured that. And I think that's a very hard thing to do, a very vulnerable thing to do, and she does it so easily. In terms of her musicality, I feel like it's a mixture of like artistic musicality, but then also just raw talent and that kind of pouring out of her. And you can definitely see like the influences from like Dina Washington in terms of her style, but then also I guess her uniqueness, because she doesn't sound like Dina Washington, even though you can tell her like influences from the 60s, from the 50s. I feel like the reason I gave it a 4.5 and not a 5 is probably because I feel like there's certain songs that are great as a standalone, but don't quite fit into the album and don't feel cohesive. So like Monkey Man, it's a great sort of, you can imagine her performing it, but as a piece, as a body of work on Back to Black, it didn't quite fit for me. So that would be the only thing. But beyond that, really talented artist. So 4.5.
I give the album a 4.5, and predominantly because I feel like I connected more to Frank than I did
Okay.
Back to Black.
Yeah.
And I just think as a first album, Frank was amazing. And I don't know if it was because it had more songs, so you saw more of Amy. And I think that the influences in Frank compared to Back to Black were different. And even though I did love Back to Black, Frank just topped it. So yeah.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
So I'm gonna rate the album a 4.7. I run quite a bit off of emotion, and when I heard the album originally, I was quite young, and I hadn't experienced the stuff that she was talking about in her music, but I feel like I did, and I used to feel her pain and sorrow, her joy as well. But now being an adult and listening to the album, having gone through similar experiences, it's just I feel like it unlocked another level of the album for me, where she could like make me feel those things when I had never experienced them and I was young, and now that I'm grown, I feel them even more deeply. And I feel like I also have just a soft spot for her because I feel as if her life was just really, really hard. And I think she's a fantastic artist. And 4.7.
I'll give it a 4.5. I'll give it a 4.5 for all the same reasons Jordan mentioned. And also because Frank is better. So this album is like her confessions to like 8701. No? Okay. But Usher's Confessions was like an incredibly perfect album. Yet and still somehow 8701 was better because it was a bit more unassuming, I think. So I think what made Frank great, as she mentioned, is just that Frank was kind of raw. Yeah, there's about a few words in this album that you can like censor. In Frank, she just goes rags, So, but also Amy was like London's sound at that time, So I was just saying to Liam that like she was like one of us, like she made a sound just like nowhere else sounded, even though she was coming through from like American influences, but she did it with like a London attitude, and that was dope. So yeah, that's that.
Hi, I'm Marie,
Hey.
and I will give this album on 4.5. I think it's crazy how she is a pop star, but she established herself like as an anti-pop star. Like, I don't know the time of the release, I think it's 2009. And it's crazy because at the time it's like Lady Gaga, it's like Rihanna, it's like everyone's super pop, super like on the floor, like electronic and stuff. And she arrives after Frank, for like 2 years or 4 years. She arrives and she has like this analogic sound that like nobody can do that except her and sell that commercially. And I think it's like incredible how she's like an anti pop star and like a rock star and a pop star. I think it's crazy, and I think this album is like the matrix between like commercially good sell and like qualitative sound. And I think nowadays it's like super difficult. And
Hi, my name is Carla, and I feel like when we watch all the music videos that she made, we can feel all the depression and all the demons, as you said before, that she had in her mind, and so that's why I give her a 4.4 or 4.5 to this album. And we can see also from the lyrics that it's all the that it's the deepest lyrics that she wrote. And I wanted to say something before. Never mind.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I would give the album maybe a 4.1. I also grew up listening to Amy Winehouse, but yeah, I probably couldn't relate to the songs as well back then. So I feel like I've learnt a lot actually going round, and I agree with a lot of the points that were raised. I think it's not necessarily a 5 because to me, a few of the songs sound very similar, but it is quite, typical of artists to have a sound or like a certain sound and kind of stick to it in an album. So I think that's fine, and I can tell that particularly like with the large band sound in terms of the drums and stuff like that, the heavy drums. It's an album that's maybe quite. I haven't listened to all of Frank, but maybe compared to Frank, designed to be performed, which is quite good. Like I could imagine it being really good on stage. Although I haven't really like watched lots of her live stuff, so I like it in that sense. But also on the flip side, I don't like it because of they're not very. That doesn't the songs don't vary largely in style. And I think I would have liked to hear more of her range in some songs in terms of having slower songs and then faster songs and so forth. But then again, it's still lovely and she's amazingly talented.
So what did you give it out of 5, sorry?
4.1.
4.1. Wow, that's the lowest rating. We have a dissenter.
Someone gave it a 4, so that's a bit higher.
Did someone give it a 4?
I'm not the biggest Amy fan, but I always had a sort of special reverence for her because she comes from my part of North London anyway. So she's always been a sort of legend in my eyes anyway. With Amy, people have mentioned Frank. There's only one track I know off of Frank, which I especially downloaded because of today's event, In My Bed, the one with the Nas instrumental. And then I thought of my favourite track off of Nas's Life Is Good album, Cherry Wine, which features Amy singing the hook. Amy had that unique sound. She had that really unique sound, and that's coming from me, a neo soul fan. And being here tonight, seeing such a great mix of people, it just shows just the gravitas that Amy had with her voice, and it's a shame that she's no longer with us. So rest in power, Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, 100%.
Hello, good evening. My name is Lex, and I actually rate this album the same rating that Jordan gave, which was 4.3. The first music video that I saw was Rehab, and I was in Georgia at the time, so I was like quite young. And I think I have to mention just location because obviously I knew being in the States, listening to her, she was a British artist. And at the time, it just kind of felt like I was the only one in my kind of range or environment that was like really listening to her or like really like appreciating her sound. Like I really loved the attitude that she came with. And it made me, did it make me wonder about London? A little bit. It made me wonder about where she came from. Not just, okay, yeah, she comes from London, the city, but just in general, like where did she come from? And by the time I got here and I actually saw how respected she was or how she was seen as an icon, she was seen as an icon in the States, so I'm not going to say that she wasn't, but I was glad to see that she was more appreciated here where she was from and everything. And I love her sound, like she's so unique. I do agree with Hannah in that the songs do sound the same, so that's why it's not a 5 for me. But even in saying that, I felt like she was so experimental, and she kind of just had like a cluster of different sounds, like from the 50s and then a bit of reggae. Like she just had jazz, like she just had a cluster of different sounds molded into one, and she made it work. And I really, really liked that. So as much as she did not have much range in terms of how her sound varied, her sound was already so unique. It was kind of like what she did was already working extremely well for her. She was really soulful. I think more so even than Amy Winehouse's music, I really enjoyed her vibe. She was somebody who I just felt like, I feel like I want to have tea with you or something, She just seemed very homely, and I just loved how down to earth she is, was. I loved how down to earth she was, and I was really, really sad when she passed because I just felt like another one has just gone, and they didn't get to feel how they made other people feel. You know, they didn't feel the greatness, the appreciation, the admiration, and not to say that she didn't, but obviously she lived through life with her problems and feeling like she didn't escape them. So yeah.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Nikay. So I'm gonna give this a 5. No, nope, whoop, whoop.
Whoa.
I'm gonna give it a 4.56. Okay, yeah, because I like even numbers, but yeah, I'll go for that. I actually do like the album. It's like if you're sitting at home and you're like stressed out over someone, like toxic relationship vibes. That's what it's giving me right now. I really like that. It's very nostalgic for me because I heard this like in school, showing my age, but I heard this in school and I didn't really understand it then, and I haven't heard it since. When did it come out? 2009? 2006. So I haven't heard it since then, but now listening to it with the adults ear, I'm like, damn, she was going through some shit. And I'm like, oh, I probably need to listen to this myself at this age, but okay. Yeah, it's really sad, like how I think she was kind of foretelling her own story through the album with like the whole rehab thing and then like the whole Back to Black. Like I think I'm like, when you look back at it, you're like, oh, like this is your story like coming out like to life. I had another point. Yeah, so thank you. She was like the blueprint for Adele, I think. So thank you, agreed.
Wait, can you elaborate on that? Because I don't actually see it.
So she was like the first UK soul singer that sung about sad songs, and that's kind of like what Adele is now. Do you see what I mean? So she kind of laid the foundation for Adele, and Adele's like only got one happy song, and Amy Winehouse has only one happy song, but the rest of it you just want to like cry, but not in a depressing way, but kind of in a depressing way, but in a depressing way. I had some other points, but I forgot, but I'll raise my hand for the microphone again. There you go.
For me, it might be a bit controversial, but it's not my favorite Amy album. I like quite a few songs from it, but at the same time, I give it like a 3.9, and it's a bit low, but it's because I heard it again when I was young. I appreciated a lot of the tunes on it because I didn't really get it, but then as I hear it in my older years, I feel sad. I feel very sad when I listen to it because obviously she's passed, the circumstances. I found that I resonated more, and I didn't realize until I actually looked up the track listing with the songs that Salam, Remy produced, because I don't know, they just had a bit more authentic soul in it, which I love, and it was more reminiscent to me of Frank, but on a bigger scale. But yeah, I just find the album really sad to listen to because she did foretell her passing, her demise and stuff, and I wish there was more people out there to have helped her, and she helped herself as well, which she sings about in Frank.
Yeah, I think I give it about 4.2 as well. I really love this album, but I love Frank more, and I'm a bit older, so I'm like about the same sort of age as Amy would be, so she just was a London girl, and I think when you were saying about the differences of being in America, I was living in the States when I was living in the States around the time that this album really blew up, and I felt like it was so different seeing the reception to her from the eyes of Americans, but being from London myself, and just resonating to Amy as like a London girl. It was weird seeing it from two different sides, and it's like everyone enjoyed it. They loved the album so much, but I just felt like they saw it differently and they appreciated it differently. And I think this one is a bit more of a like concept album in terms of the style of music and the themes and the sort of the references, but at the same time she's such an amazing songwriter, and so her lyrics and the storytelling always carries through, and that was like consistent from both albums. But I just think overall I liked Frank more, but this is still a really good album. I feel like you can listen to it from start to finish. You don't need to necessarily skip songs that much. There's some that I like a lot more than others. I don't feel the need to like skip them over like in some albums that are just, you know, feel like filler. Maybe it's because it's short as well, so you can just let it run. But yeah, it's good.
Reason why I was saying that that I thought that your point was quite interesting as far as, you know, putting her troubles into her album and people maybe not kind of extending a handout for help, but rather just kind of looking at it as entertainment. I guess that what I was going to ask is, like, is there an argument there that this album was like a cry for help?
I remember that because it was all over the papers in the tabloid. She was always in the paper when, you know, papers were a thing, the newspaper, and it was sad. It was always something about Amy, but when you're young, you're not thinking, oh, this woman's so troubled and all of that. Like, I was a teenager when this album came out. You're just thinking, wow, look at her life. Like, this is crazy what she's going through. And then all of a sudden she passed away. And yeah, I don't know. Looking back now, listening to it now, it just comes with a lot of memories. Like, okay, people should have helped her, but they didn't give her all that help that she needed. And maybe she didn't want to accept it. I don't know. I don't know her, but it seems like through her album, it's very telling that she knew she needed something, and they were just feeding, you know, that side of her.
Like a Grammy performance. I think when she won, at the time, again, being young, you're just like, oh my God, she's won. But that person that went and done her little speech and stuff did not look like a person of the right aura, considering the album that she just produced.
Yeah.
And only now, being the age that I am, and looking back, and like, if I was to rewatch that video, I would be like, that girl needs help. Whereas when I was younger, again, feeding into that whole thing of like, come on, Amy, make an album, you're going to be banging. You don't think of it at the time. And I think that as time's gone on, I think as a collective, we are more mindful of the way artists portray themselves. So it's a shame that she didn't get what we have now, especially in our thinking and our mannerisms and the way we behave then.
How does that reflect on us as people, right? Who obviously appreciate her for her music, for her craft, right? But then we can obviously see that there are a lot of demons at play when it kind of comes to her. But it's a thing where we're as invested in that eventuality of demise as much as we are invested in her music. Like, what does that kind of say about the actual consumer?
I'm going to speak on it from the perspective of someone who admires some artists who have gone through such trouble. So I think it's something to do with sensationalism. The fact that some artists, their artistry are kind of elevated or put on a pedestal, but it kind of comes with a dissociation of their humanity. I feel like we see the artist as an entity, but not as a human being. And I think because the artist's music make us feel a certain type of way, and we're very appreciative and sometimes even selfish in that manner, we want to maintain that that dynamic, that feeling of, oh, you are singing about these painful things. I relate to them. It helps me deal with my own, I guess, emotions or feelings. But the only way you can sing that is because you are going through something similar or maybe worse, especially given the magnitude that you are on. As fans, as consumers, I don't think we have the foresight of putting the well-being of the artist first, because we're kind of thinking, if you get better mentally, you're going to stop producing this music, and I'm no longer going to be able to relate to it and somehow listen to you anymore. And I think these themes, you know, are similar, whether it's from rappers who do like rag to riches kind of music, where they start off where they talk about poverty and struggles, and then when they do get better on, it's no longer their reality, and then they change the topic matter, and people are kind of angry at them for changing, but they're no longer in that place where they produce that music. So it's unfair for consumers to sometimes put those expectations. And I think in the case of Amy, she was a very troubled person, but I don't think the public, either subconsciously or consciously, realize that, oh, this is something that we need to like safeguard her for. Otherwise, she was speaking, she kind of prophesied a lot of the things that happen. And yeah, I think the public sometimes can get selfish in wanting to keep the essence of the music so raw at the detriment of the artist who is producing them.
Sometimes you love toxic shit. Like, you like, it's sad to say, but sometimes you like to watch other people in a worse predicament than you, because it kind of makes you feel subconsciously a little bit better. So us like saying, oh my gosh, Amy's on drugs, she's injecting like shit into like her feet, and like her feet were like bleeding and stuff in like the ballerina shoes. I actually vividly remember that picture as well. And it's like, oh, she's going down this horrible path, but we're endorsing it, and we're like saying, yeah, like this is her. But to her, it's like being stuck on the wall and everyone just googly eyes at her, and it's like, okay, now what? Like, she's a show pony, because she kind of is in a sense, because she's an artist, but at the same time it's like she is actually a human. So yeah, like, as much like it's low vibrational shit, but sometimes it's stuff you kind of want to watch. It's like Krishan Rock and flipping Blueface, like you don't want to watch it, but you watch it. But yeah, but you appreciate, well, not them because they're for the shit, but sorry, I swear. But you appreciate the artist and the music she produces, because it's like, rah, even though you're going through shit times, your music still bangs though, so I'm gonna still look out for you. But yeah.
Cool, thank you for that.
Going a little bit off of what Idris said, like, I just think as fans and as consumers, no, I'm not going to just speak for myself. We are greedy and we are selfish to an extent. And I think even recently, or I would say probably in the last 4 years, I had to start differentiating myself between, am I a fan of something or am I a supporter of something? Because I feel like if I'm a fan of something, then I'm interested in what that person's putting out that I like. If I'm a supporter of an artist, that means I support them in whatever journey that they're going through. Because if I sit here and now that I think about it after listening to you, Nikkei, I'm sitting here and I'm like, if she didn't make Rehab, if she made a song like, yes, I went to rehab and I got healed, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, she's overcome those problems. How many fans would she have lost? You know, not to say that she would have lost most of them, but really and truly, it was like Adele. When Adele went from making the sad love songs up into the pop songs, how many fans did she lose? How many fans did people lose when they... Yeah, you know, and after they, you know, kind of portrayed themselves in a way that was healed. So as consumers, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are humans with our own lives and our own problems, so we like to see that being mirrored in the limelight, like somebody who's actually on the stage mirroring or representing the pain and the trauma that we've been through. We do like to see that. But to an extent, it can be quite selfish and it can be quite greedy as well, where you're constantly wanting, like, oh yeah, make another album. Like, think about how many times people, I don't know, they're on way different levels, but think about how many times people have begged Rihanna to make an album. Do you know? It's like, let that woman do what she's doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like let people, like, let the artists live their life, go through their healing. Do you know what I'm saying? But people don't want that. People, we want the music, we want the story, we want to know what's happening, and we're not, and to be honest with you, we're not really entitled to that. We're not entitled to their lives. Just because we do pay for their music and we support their art, we're not entitled to their lives because of that. And I think that people do forget that. And then the moment when, you know, you have an artist that has their own view or something that's different than a fan, the fans will rip them apart. That's why I have to differentiate between a fan and a supporter, because if you actually support the artist, you're actually there for the person. If you're a fan, you're just there for as long as the art is good to you. But yeah, that's my point.
Just two things. First of all, there's a line I like in a poem where he said, by Percy Bysshe Shelley, I think. and he says our sweetest songs are songs of woe, and songs of sadness, basically. So I think we gravitate towards sad songs because they're just the way our lives are. I don't think it's that we necessarily need somebody to feed that sadness. It's just the thing that we just know is true. It's like everyone's gonna experience sadness at some point, and that person that gets to express it, and people get to hear it. And I think it's just it's a reciprocal relationship. I don't think it's just one-sided. Like, give us your sadness. I think that's a little cynical. On the other hand, I also think, what are we supposed to do? Like, we don't. Not only do we not have a right or access to their lives, but we are not that. Our function here is to just buy the shit, not to fix them. You know, they've got friends and family. That's what their friends and family are for, not us. What are we supposed to do?
Well, her father said that she was all right, didn't he?
Well, take it up with him. You know what I mean? But this the question you raised, I think, is like a very common one, like about consumerism and the toxicity of consumerism.
Yeah.
I take that. I just also think, in the end, the only voice we have as consumers is our purchasing power, nothing else. So what am I supposed to do to help Amy Winehouse? What are any of us supposed to do? What any of us could have done? I'm just always interested in like that perspective. Like, I don't know. I don't feel no guilt about it. That's all I'm saying. So like, I wonder, like, from a perspective of, if you do feel like there's a guilt that's associated with that, then give me the solution, basically.
I think just to touch on what you said, basically, is like, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Of course, consumerism is a toxic trait, well, not toxic trait, it's capitalism. People want things, people buy things, it's just the nature of society. But I do think it's not a thing of like, we are going like, feed me your pain, feed me your sadness. People connect with things when people make certain songs. Like, if it's not Amy, people would listen to, like, for another person, say Brent Fires, people like how he makes toxic music, and people like that type of sound and whatnot and stuff like that. It's not like they're asking, oh, tell me that stuff. It just connects. People connect to what they hear. So I think it's more like in regards to like how we help her. We can't help her. It's her circle. It's the people around her. It's who's her day to day. That's the people that, not to put blame, but that's the people that it didn't work out. Basically, not trying to say not it's like it's their fault, but it's not. But things happen in it. But it's like that's her safeguarding. That's who were the people that were meant to kind of just help her, but it just didn't go the way it was. It's not the consumer's fault. The consumer just wants the product. Really, that's the end of the day. Like you said, and our relationship ends with as soon as the purchase is made, and of course you don't want people to hurt themselves. You don't want them to die. I have a lot of like artists that I love, and some artists that I've heard that have passed away, and it's hurt me, of course, but it's not something that I can control. Life happens. People lead their own lives, and things happen. I have no control of what happens to them.
Yeah.
They have no control of what happens to me.
Cool.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think a key word that you said there was like safeguarding. So to kind of put things back into perspective and context, understanding that like when Frank, for example, was released, she was like 18, 19. When she released Back to Black, she was like 21, 22. Like she's a young woman. She's like a young woman kind of dealing with these issues and kind of growing up and expressing her pain. And if we look at like 1997, you look at Princess Diana and her relationship with the tabloids, like her literally being chased to her death. If you look at the culture, when we talk about, I think we're almost looking at consumerism within the lens of like how it is now in our relationship to artists now. Whereas then, if you are a consumer of her art or you like love her, etc., even if you hated her, but you're buying the tabloids, you're buying the Sun, you're buying the Daily Mail, you're feeding into the sort of frenzied paparazzi and the tabloids, and there's like loads of video footage of her like lashing out at them, etc. Like that culture of spectacle that was created around her celebrity is definitely something that the consumers at the time fed into. And so that is where I would say like that relationship dynamic was sort of happening. But when it comes to like her actual close circle, for example, on the song Rehab, her like I think her the manager of like the label she was on at the time basically trying to convince her to go to rehab, and then she's like, oh, but my daddy thinks I'm fine. So yes, a lot of the responsibility being like, what is her relationship to her father, and to what extent is her father just exploiting her? Like if you look at even like what we have recently with like Britney Spears and her father, like what is the relationship dynamic there in which you're essentially kind of pawning off your child in order to make the next hit? Because there's only like 3 years difference in terms of when Frank was released and when Back to Black was released. Had she gone to rehab, as someone mentioned over there, perhaps we would have gotten a I went to rehab and I healed. You would still have the same level of depth and emotion.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't have the catastrophic ending potentially.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, as an artist, your lane is a certain lane.
Yeah.
Like certain people can make party records. Certain people can make bang bang, shoot 'em up, kill niggas records. Some people can make, you know, that. And I think that, you know, had Amy gone through the healing, maybe she wouldn't have been as good as an artist. I mean, like people say like that with like Mary J. Blige. Mary J. Blige is always regarded as she's better when she's going through a heartache and pain and all of these sorts of things. And just kind of touch on a point that was made about being, are you a fan of someone or you're a supporter of someone? And like whether you want to see that person do good as a person or as an artist. And the reality is, we don't ever really meet the real person of these artists. Even when they're in interviews, they're still performing as the artist that they are. So we never really get to see who the real person is behind the artist. We only buy in, as it was said, as a consumer. Our job is just to be a consumer of their product, and we never see the real person behind it. So I also think that it's not our responsibility to do that. That's what I just said, it's their friends and family. So I don't think we should kid ourselves to think that when we're seeing them in interviews and they appear as a certain person, that is who they really are. They're still performing as, you know, an actor, as an artist.
As a character.
Yeah.
Got you. So would you say that, like, and this is extended to everyone here as well, like, would you say that great art kind of comes with great consequences?
I think anything that you do that gains massive popularity comes with that. Because you can be a great artist and not be popular.
Yeah.
And I don't think that has the same weight as if you're very popular and you maybe make good music. Even if you don't make good music, just because you have a certain amount of influence or a certain amount of visibility, I think that's where the responsibility comes from.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
Like was mentioned before, I think because her circumstances were unfolding in terms of her dealing with addiction and it being in paper. And I remember, I think she was in quite a turbulent marriage or in a relationship with a boyfriend.
With Blake.
And I don't know if maybe that kind of fueled the addiction. There's something about it unfolding in real time and witnessing it. So almost in the same way, the spectacle of Britney Spears, her breakdown happening in real time, that is tragic, but also for people that are on the outside, it's quite morbidly fascinating. And I think her writing about it as she's going through that kind of those issues related to people, because I've seen, for example, people always debating about, there's lots of celebrities, so like Beyonce releasing Single Ladies when she was like in a very happy marriage, and people being like, oh, you know, it feels a bit disingenuous and stuff like that. And recently that debate came up because I think Sierra previewed some music that she was working on, and it was about, oh, for the single ladies, and everyone was like, oh, but you're with Russell and Sierra's prayer and all that. So people were like, but I mean, she was once single, so who knows, maybe she's trying to speak to someone. But the point is, when you're not in that period of time and you release something about a period of time that you're no longer in, some people see it as disingenuous. So it's the fact that it kind of matched what she was going through and it was happening in real time.
Cool. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to build upon what Princess said in terms of the connection between consumerism and how that factors into the spiral of an artist. And I think our connection to an artist doesn't just stop at when we buy the music. If that was the case, then the amount of the machinery that goes behind keeping somebody a celebrity wouldn't be as effective. I think as humans, and someone had made this analogy a while back, I don't remember where, but someone said compared modern day artists to like, previous gladiators. That sense of someone is literally, their life is on the line, and we're all there to see it as an entertainment, with no care for what actually ends up happening in the stadium. Like, they are literally there for our pleasure, and I feel like sometimes people don't realize that that's the dynamic that exists between us, the public, and artists. That sense of being built up by the record labels and the execs, being put on that sort of pedestal and then being slaughtered essentially, depending on how you see that pan out, for the profit of these people, but also for our entertainment. And you can go a bit deeper in that sense of, sometimes this is used as a distraction when there are other things that we could be focusing our attention on. But I say all that to say, there's a lot of money that's made behind somebody being a celebrity, and it doesn't just stop at you buying that album, because the newspaper that they make about whatever controversy that they are in, it sells. The clicks that they get on their website, the blogs that they do, the paparazzi, the pictures, and everything like that. It's all it's all related. And I think as consumers, as supporters, I like to feel we have. I'm not going to go as far as to say duty or care, but we do need to look at them as human beings who can get caught up in that sort of limelight and understand that it's a lot more complicated. We can't just be like, yeah, I'm just buying the music. This is where my dynamic with you stops. Because if that was the case, you would just buy the music and listen to it, and that's it. But if you are reading any sort of article that's made about them, going to the concerts, or buying any product that they advertised in, like all of these other things that comes with the celebrity, you are feeding into the frenzy. And when you see an artist kind of derailing from what would be a healthy state of mind, if you care about a person, you would like them to be okay, regardless of whether the music is still produced. And I think the way one of the examples I use is an artist called Isaiah Rashad. Isaiah Rashad is an artist from TDE who has battled with a lot of suicidal ideations and alcoholism and drug addictions. And it got to a point where fans were harassing him on social media for him to release music because he's that good. But he had to kind of stay strong and trust that my real fans will love me when I'm at a better state. And his latest album, he's done it completely sober, and it's amazing. It's such an amazing piece of work. And I feel like as fans, that's where you want your artists to be, because the longer they are alive, the more music they can give you. We don't want them to be short burst of fire. We want them to be kind of continuous in their success.
Yeah. No, really great point.
You said the artist, we didn't say the point, so I'm going to say it before someone else comes on and says it. No, so again, the example I was going to use was Isaiah Rashad, but more what had happened kind of over the past year, where like an incident involving him, and then on social media, his fans, or in this case, as Lexi said, his supporters just coming to everybody's necks, like just not letting, if you're going to say a bad word about him, if you're going to have a homophobic comment, absolutely not even like standing for it, and just showing an outpouring of love. And I think probably something that is different from the time in which Amy was at is where you have like the tabloids, and it's almost like a one-way form of communication. So unless you're sending your artist like a letter, there's not a lot of ways to kind of show that appreciation. Whereas where we have social media now, it's very easy to just at your artist, and if 1,000 people are doing that, if 100,000 people are doing that, you're very much going to see that outpouring of love. And I think, or hate, but in this particular example of Isaiah Rashad, seeing like that wave of support, and again, literally as sort of like you said, supporters as opposed to fans. So I think the relationship between people and artists has probably changed over the years as like technology and social media, etc., have also changed. There was a separate point that I wanted to make actually, but it was again to do with like the relationship between almost artists, poets, writers, and pain and woe, if you to use that word. I think it's almost a precarious place, because it's almost like heavy is the head that, like, I don't know, holds the pen in this particular scenario, because you are so close to the pain, the things that people find it really hard to express. And so when they do then see someone is able to express something that they felt, there is that sense of, okay, I want you to write more of my experience, and almost seeing the artist as a vessel for them to experience human feeling, as opposed to truly understanding that, yes, this person is also a human feeling those things as well. But yeah, that'd be it.
As far as like Amy goes, I think there's a lot of appreciation for her music, but I think there's also a lot of appreciation for how she puts words together. You know, I think how she's able to really kind of like narrate like the human condition. You know, I think, you know, she's almost second to none in that regard. You know, I feel like she's really kind of like, I think with her like introduction, like she really kind of like reframed the way in which pop music could be approached. Like I think around her time, it was very much, you know, product led as far as music goes. But she brought like a humane aspect to, I guess, like the field of popular music, which had been absent for so long. And it kind of brings it back to what this lady said around her being like a anti-celebrity almost. And I think people very much like gravitated towards her because she, you know, created or represented the space which was very much underserved. But nonetheless, you know, speaking on like her writing and the way she's able to depict emotion in that, like, would we say does emotional intelligence differ from making good emotional decisions, or are they one and the same? Because from her music, you'd think that, you know, she had very like strong kind of understandings of the human condition, but then when you kind of then go on to see the decisions she makes through her music alongside outside of her music, like, would you say that there's a separation between the two as far as understanding emotion and the emotional decisions in which one goes on to make?
I think something that has to be considered with this album is that she confesses that she is an addict, you know, and so her emotions, like how she's talking about things, is she's got a strong opinion because she's addicted to weed, she's addicted to love, you know, the pain. I think we have to consider that when we're talking about the emotional intelligence, all that kind of thing. She's coming from a different place that a lot of people who have not had an addiction before may not understand, you know. So that is why I kept referring to it being a sad occasion, because when you're going through an addiction, you need support from your loved ones and everything. And it seems like her album is crying out for help, but what was really going on, you know? So that's what I have to say.
I feel like it wouldn't be particularly fair if just because the way she behaved outside of her music was a reflection on how she understood emotions, because everyone digests emotions differently. Everyone feels things differently. I may feel some things a certain way. You guys might feel things a certain way. So for us to be like, well, her music is saying something, but her behavior outside of it is saying something else, it's just not fair. And I honestly think this is just the one point I'm going to make. I think considering how much she was going through and the trouble she was in and how much she was struggling with life, the fact that she could even put into words the way she was feeling, the way she did, is actually something that's so incredible, because she was in a lot of pain and she was using different things to deal, but still managed to produce bodies of work that explained how she felt. Aside from the way she was portraying herself to us. And someone made a point earlier where it was like, we don't actually know her, which is true. We know her through her music and we know her through what she showed us publicly, but did we really know who she was? No, because nobody actually knows who Amy Winehouse is, because I don't know about y'all, but I haven't met her in real life. So I think she is emotionally intelligent. I think her music reflects it, and I think her behavior does, in a way where it's like, I keep making it present, which was making me kind of sad, but she did feel a lot of pain, and feeling your feelings is a level of maturity a lot of people don't get to experience.
Yeah, I was just going to basically just touch on that, what everyone's pretty much said. It's like, yeah, she was emotionally intelligent. Like, it's not the easiest thing to express how you feel and what's going through your mind in your day to day and your months, your years, and how everything has just been tough. It doesn't, just because you can express it doesn't mean you don't still do the same habits that may not be good for you. Like, you can be aware of what's wrong, but it might not be the easiest thing to like fix. Stop cold turkeys. Life is just like that, and if it was, everyone would be perfect. But it's just understanding that she's a human person that was just very aware of her surroundings and her life, and she was trying, but sadly she just didn't win that battle. So I'd say she was therefore very much emotionally intelligent. Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying. I think actually what it is not just a matter of like emotional intelligence, but her like artistic ability. The fact that she could write some unholy war, or but there's about 3 songs in there that are like incredible lyrically. Like, to write that lyrically, whether you're sad or you're happy, it doesn't matter. Like, your ability to do that with words is incredible. I'd put that next to maybe like Eminem. He's the only other person I can think of off the top of my head who can tell you exactly how he's feeling and still make it lyrically ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And I think in that way they're quite similar. Compare that with maybe Biggie, who was not so good at telling you he wasn't so good at making you feel sad. He was good at telling you stories, but he wasn't, by comparison to like an Eminem, he wasn't quite as good as don't get me wrong, Biggie was a master with words, but he couldn't really draw like that blood out your veins in the same way at the same time. So like, yeah, I guess I'm just saying that to sort of draw a comparison to like artistry versus emotional intelligence. They have their lines in which they cross, but they're not exactly the same thing.
Cool.
So I don't know. Also, Tupac, by the way. Anyway, that's another conversation.
Someone had to just slip Tupac into a Amy Winehouse discussion.
Can I add on to that?
Sorry?
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to the last 2 points. I agree with what you're saying. Because somebody is very artistically gifted, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's emotionally intelligent. Like, if you're good with art, you can make somebody feel something off of something that's very basic. And I don't know if you guys watch battle rap, but that's one of the criticisms of Loaded Lux. People say, oh, he says all of these fancy words, and all you're saying is, I went through a door. But you're saying in such a verbose way that everybody is like, wow, this is amazing, it's mind-blowing. But the concept is very simple. As a lot of music often is, it's a very simple concept, but the way it's expressed is what gives you an emotional movement, or what makes you resonate with it emotionally. The other point I wanted to connect to was, just because you know something doesn't mean you're able to do it. I mean, a lot of people know how to lose weight. You exercise and you eat better, but a lot of people struggle with it because it contains other things like discipline, mental toughness, and, all of those other things. So just because you know better, finances. Just because you know better, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't do better.
Unfortunately, I have to be that person, and I'm going to be that person, but some of the stuff that Amy sings about and expresses, I feel like are very specific to, I guess, the experience of being a woman. So I don't necessarily agree with your point. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't agree with it because there's just some things that are just very specific to us or anyone who's female presenting, and it may not track and it may not be understood by everyone, but there are things that she talks about that are very specific to being a woman, and I think she did that. Sorry, I had to be messy for a second, but I had to say that and be that person. But she hit several points that I don't think men can particularly agree with. That's me saying as nice as I can as well. So
I was gonna say something. Could you elaborate?
I want you to elaborate.
I just want you to elaborate on like what some of those points you would say are, just for clarity.
I'm not gonna speak for men because I can't relate to their experience either, but there's just some parts in her music, in her discography that, I don't know, they just hit a certain part for me personally. I don't want to speak for all of us here, and I don't, but in my experience, being a woman. There's just some things that are just so deeply rooted in femininity and how we deeply feel feelings to the point where it's a bit catastrophic. And I don't know, I feel like she does hits those points.
Can I
Yeah,
chime in
please.
there?
Yes,
Because I
please.
think what you're saying is really interesting, because I think, like, with Amy Winehouse, like, particularly, like, well, not particularly, but, like, throughout her first project and her sophomore project, like, there's an element of narcissism and also, like, being someone who's, like, the empath, like, in the relationship. And what you find in, I guess, relationships which are toxic, you have someone who's a narcissist and you have someone who is the empath. And I think through Amy Winehouse's albums, like, she almost depicts, like, both positions depending on who the guy in question may be. So, like, sometimes in her music, like, I think In My Bed is probably is a song that kind of comes to mind, where she's almost like discarding the guy, and is like, yo, like, I don't like you at all, but yo, we can do, I don't like you past this point, but, you know, we can just kind of keep it, you know, easy and kind of go our separate ways that don't get emotionally attached. But then there's other songs where, like, she's singing from the position of the guy that she's just discarded, like in the previous song, you know. So, you know, despite what you're saying in terms of, you know, there's only sentiments from her music that only a woman can most likely kind of engage with, which I'm not going to argue with that. I think as a male listener, right, like, it's a thing where, like, she's one of, like, the first artists, for me, female artists, who kind of balances what one would kind of, like, expect from a woman and being in a relationship, if that makes sense.
I actually didn't even think about it that way. That's a really good way of looking at it. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way.
Mic drop.
So this wasn't actually going to be a point. It was more going to be a question.
Yeah.
If I can kind of remember it. So I know that, like, one of Amy Winehouse's influences was Dina Washington. So for those who, like, don't know, she's like I guess a jazz singer from, like, the 50s. She died at the age of 39. I think by the time she had died, she'd had, like, I think 7 husbands. She had died from, I think, 2 different drugs that were, like, in her system, and then also alcohol. So just like an overloading of different things in her system. And this is, like, one of, like, Amy Winehouse's, like, really, I think Sarah Vaughan as well, but, like, one of her, like, really major, like, influences. You kind of see that, and she sings the song "What a Difference a Day Makes, 24 Little Hours." The question I was going to pose was, to what extent do you think that artists who have a predisposition to writing about love in an overwrought, in a all-encompassing, almost codependent way, tend to almost fall into that cycle of almost abuse and having, like, a power dynamic where that seems, like, quite negative? So if we were looking at, like, for example, someone in a more present, like maybe a Summer Walker, like, to what extent is the relationships she's having and her ability to kind of express the love that she feels, but almost in a very overwrought, like, all-encompassing, I'm kind of giving my whole life to you, scissor as well. To what extent would you say that the writing is just expressing that dynamic, or in kind of looking at love in that way, you kind of find yourself in those dynamics? Because
Are you saying as a listener?
I think as a listener, looking at, I guess, artists who are able to sort of write about their pain and write about love in certain ways, are the artists who write about love in very overwrought ways and very, like, almost codependent narratives, are they just sort of writing their life, or is it a case that
they're pandering to the crowd?
There's a point in there somewhere, and I'm, like, trying to tease it out, but also not extend the question to, like, 3 different points.
Yeah.
So if any of you can find a point and then answer it, that'd be really great.
In relation to that, I think these are people that naturally feel quite deeply. And we were talking a lot about consumerism before. So if you think of it in the picture of they're trying to find love and form relationships whilst being famous, you keeping in mind the fact that you also tend to love quite deeply and might ignore some red flags because you're so compassionate and you put all yourself in a relationship and stuff like that, and you might attract certain characters naturally because you are famous. It's just the positioning of things and the company you might attract. I think it makes them maybe naturally more vulnerable to those situations, but there are different variables, including your circle of people, that can I guess increase the likelihood of maybe being in that abusive dynamic, or even Amy's case, like being like forming addictions, basically. Like, so I don't know.
I think people also write about what they know or who they are. So if you're that type of person and you have an artistic ability, more than likely you're going to express your artistic ability through who you are with this, addiction to love, or however you want to define it. And I think if say for instance you do that, you could, like, it's a form of therapy. I think for a lot of artists, that they write out their emotions and their feelings, and it's a form of therapy. But the thing is, like, let's say for instance you went for a really turbulent time, or really like a hard time, and you wrote about it. Now imagine that song blows up and becomes famous now. Now this kind of touches on your the whole point of playing into it for consumerism. It's like, well, I'm now known for this one thing. Like, I always remember when Kanye did the Dear Mama song, and obviously he wrote it before his mother passed, but after she passed, now imagine your mother passing and you have to continuously perform that song. Now, like, where do you kind of separate who you are as an individual and how much pain this song is causing you, versus the fact that everybody wants to hear it, and it's blown up, and do you understand what I'm saying? So it's a bit of a dichotomy and a juxtaposition, but like you said, I don't really have an end point to that point, but yeah.
Yeah.
Someone pointed out that Amy was almost like kind of like who Adele is right now. Like, she kind of laid the foundation for the figure that Adele is. I don't know how many of you guys feel about. How do you feel about that? Strongly. So.
I feel like it's when you hear them speak. And what was the name of that woman that went on like the X Factor? And
You don't know what Lewis?
No, the other one. No. This the.
That was Britain's Got Talent.
It's I even know, but Stacey Solomon. Yes, it's when they speak and you're like, okay, cool, you're from Ends, and then you sing and you're not from Ends, and it's that ability to kind of balance those different. Personally, I feel like there is an element of you hear her speak, you hear Amy speak, and she's from Camden. You can hear Camden. And then she's one of us. She's like the everyman or every woman. And then she speaks, and then it kind of is like this transcendental vocal that transports you to a different era that she doesn't even seem like she was born in, and yet she's able to tap into.
Yeah.
And all these sort of, the three artists I mentioned, so the Stacey Solomon, the Adele, like, you can't tell me you hear Adele speaking when she's at Carnival and, oh my God, yeah, I know that a beautiful voice is going to come out. Like, that's just... Yeah, so I think there's an element of that, but that element of being a human, a down-to-earth person, but then your music just transcends, and that, when we're talking about legacy, being something that allows her to kind of work with the Nas, work with different people. So yeah, that would be...
Cool. Well, we'll end it there. But thank you everyone for their contributions today. Really appreciate it, and see you next time.